45% of stores don't have reviews at all. Like they don't have a tool, they don't have reviews on their site, they're not using anything to power reviews.
Welcome to Honest Ecommerce, a podcast dedicated to cutting through the BS and finding actionable advice for online store owners. I'm your host, Chase Clymer, and I believe running a direct-to-consumer brand does not have to be complicated or a guessing game. On this podcast, we interview founders and experts who are putting in the work and creating real results. I also share my own insights from running our top Shopify consultancy, Electric Eye. We cut the fluff in favor of facts to help you grow your e-commerce business. Let's get on with the show. Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of Honest Ecommerce. Today, I'm welcoming the show a pretty known figure in the space. You've been around for quite a while in this direct-to-consumer e-commerce world. Jeremy Horowitz, how you doing today?
I'm doing great, Chase. Thanks for having me.
I'm excited. Quickly, for those that your name doesn't ring out for, give us the crash course. What have you been up to the last 10 years?
Yeah, so my decade plus in the e-commerce space, I started by building Magento connections, then worked at an agency where we migrated WooCommerce sites over to Shopify back when there was about 250,000 sites. From about there, spent 6-7 years on the brand side, so managing high-growth Shopify Plus brands, most notably Lumi. Went there, we scaled through from 6 to 8 figures. Also worked for an automotive aftermarket business called Car Park Kings, 6 to 8 figures as well. Did that for a long time, then spent the past 5 years on the SaaS side. So I worked at a bunch of high growth Shopify apps. And about a year ago, I left Gorgias to full-time start a private equity company where we acquire both Shopify brands and Shopify apps. In that time, started analyzing the market, doing a lot of deep research where we started this annual top 100 Shopify app report, which I'm sure we'll dive into today. Today I split my time between running the private equity firm and then operating the portfolio companies that we've acquired.
Absolutely. And so he kind of buried the lead there. But what we're talking about today is Jeremy put in quite some time here. And so he ran through various data sources, which I'll let him kind of outline his the method behind the madness. But basically, the top 100 Shopify apps in the ecosystem that are being utilized by brands above that $1 million threshold, which I think is a unique distinction.
Yeah, we actually started doing this a couple of years ago. We looked at, okay, what are all the apps the Shopify Plus brands are using and what are the most common? The really interesting thing that we found is that two really interesting insights. One, Shopify Plus brands aren't actually as big as you probably think they are. The average revenue per year for a Shopify Plus brand is $2 million, right? And you have $1 billion brands in that data set. So most of them are actually in that $500,000 to $2.5 million range. The other super interesting insight we had was that there are just as many brands doing about 1 to 10 million off of Shopify Plus, still on Shopify, like on a regular plan, than there are on Plus. So when we really wanted to look at what's the complete data set of what are these larger brands on Shopify are using, we really wanted to expand it out to anyone who's doing an estimated $1 million in GMV. A couple really interesting key highlights, like I think that are really important to start with. There are over 3 million stores that are now powered on Shopify across the entire ecosystem, which is just insane to think about. And then the second part is there's about 103,000 stores that are doing around $1 million and up. And so that's 3% of the total Shopify audience is in that $1 million mark and up place. So then what we did is we have a bunch of data sources. We can basically see what people are installing into the front end of their website. We crawled all those data sources to then find, okay, who are the apps that are most common among that tech stack, coordinated into the top 100, which I know we'll dive into a little bit more specifics, and then broke it out by categories, email and SMS, support, reviews, data and analytics, kind of all those major categories that everybody uses and on their stores. And there's some really interesting trends and I think some big surprises as to what those big brands on Shopify are actually using.
Absolutely. And then just here at the top, I want to tell the listeners, and it's going to be linked in the show notes. All of this is on an awesome Notion document that's not gated. You can go and play around with it. And it's got a lot of additional insights and clarity behind just how this kind of data set got cleaned and sourced, like, get rid of some of the things that have multiple domains because they got a European website and an Australian website, et cetera. Make sure it was only active ones. Make sure, it's just the .com. So there's a lot of extra information and extra stuff on this kind of Notion document, but we're going to kind of try to give you the crash course in 15 to 20 minutes here.
Yeah, gotta leave some of the good stuff so that they go read the report.
All righty. So I guess what is the number 2 most installed app? Let's not go with number 1.
Yeah, so everyone probably knows that it's Klaviyo as the most installed app. They have a pretty dominant position. I think what will surprise most people is Judge Me is actually the second most installed app in the Shopify ecosystem.
Doesn't surprise me because we were one of the first Judge Me partners when they launched their partner ecosystem this year.
That's awesome.
And I know that for a fact. It's also a great product, and it's hard to argue the value.
Yeah, I mean, $15 a month is pretty hard to argue. What I think is what's most impressive and like a standout for me is how fast Judge Me is growing. Judge Me is actually year over year has more installs than Klaviyo does. And why that's impressive is Klaviyo is $1 billion public company. They have about 150,000 total stores that are working with across their entire customer base, all platforms, all sizes. Judge Me is basically like a 10 million ARR just shop. Well, they have other platforms as well, but really focused on Shopify. And essentially the 7,700 stores that they installed in the 1 million range is adding 50% of the total base that they started the year before with. Mm-hmm. So basically they grew by 50%, which, Klaviyo grew by 7,000 installs as well, but off of 40,000 installs. So it's a much more doable increase. But yeah, they're really big. I think what actually probably the biggest surprise in the whole report is MailChimp is still the third most installed app at 18,000 stores. And I think everybody, every year we bring it up is like, it's got to be old code. It's got to be dead. But they even grew by almost 2,000 installs last year. So
yeah. And we're going to be very nice guys. We're not going to say anything bad about any of these apps. If you want our personal opinions, we'll do it off record. But on this, we're just going to talk about the ones that are installed and not make anything that might bite us in the butt later.
Yeah, but every time we bring it up, it's like everyone's so surprised because I think Klaviyo has such a strong brand in the space. But I think MailChimp is also a good...
I think that just legacy brands, if it's not broke, don't fix it. So that MailChimp number doesn't surprise me.
Yeah. And I think that's a big insight is that there's actually a lot of these like mega, what I call SaaS brands that aren't built for Shopify, aren't necessarily focused on the space, but we still see this incredible install base around. And really strong presence, MailChimp, Zendesk, ShareASale, Microsoft Clarity wasn't even in, we've done this report for 3 years. This is our third year in a row. Microsoft Clarity wasn't even in the first report. Now they're number 5 as one of the most installed apps in the whole ecosystem. Yeah,
let's go through the top 10 real quick, just because we're looking at it to give some people a smile. So it's Klaviyo's number 1, Judge Me number 2, MailChimp number 3, InstaFeed, which is a visualization that brings in your Instagram feed to your Shopify store at number 4, Microsoft Clarity at number 5, Push-Owl, which is now Brevo, they're owned by the same company, at number 6, Afterpay at number 7, Hotjar at number 8, at number 9, Infinite Product Options, and number 10, Pagefly. That surprises me.
Yeah. And you had basically to be in the top 10, you had to have over almost 11,000 installs and up. I think the other big insight for me was, I always assumed the site extensions and all the other apps that kind of plugged the Shopify roadmap was going to be, things that just kind of went away and not really like key features. But InstaFeed, Infinite Product Options, Pagefly have these massive adoptions. And I think there's still this like great use case to be had of a not that expensive, not that loud app, but it does one thing really, really well. It solves my use case. And a lot of brands still use it and still love it.
Yeah.
And so I think there's a really interesting, there's still a little bit of that, not hacking together, but plugging together a bunch of individual tools that, when we got started was very, very popular. And I think it's still happening and still a pretty popular strategy that works for a lot of brands.
I'm going to probably say this all day is like, if it's not broke, don't fix it. Like, is it worth your time to rebuild something that already works or focus on your next product, your next winning marketing campaign, etc.? Like, that's a lot, because as founders, you don't have that, luxury to have unlimited bandwidth. So it's like, what should you be focusing on? And replacing, outdated technology or whatever, not calling any of these out specifically, but is that the best use of your time? Sometimes you could argue no. Like, it works now. Let's just focus on selling more product.
Yeah, exactly. Right. And advertising, like, how do we just get more traffic and more people to the site? I think what was the other biggest surprise or standout that I think most people don't really appreciate it until like they think about it for a minute is email and SMS. I kind of lump them into one major category now that basically everybody offers both, has 84% market adoption. So basically 84% of this segment, the 103,000 stores have some sort of email or SMS tool. The really interesting thing is that the second closest category is reviews at 55%. And so while, there's a lot of noise in the review space and 2 out of the top 3 players, Judge Me and Yapo, are both very heavily installed and very big adoption, 45% of stores don't have reviews at all. Like they don't have a tool. They don't have reviews on their site. They're not using anything to power reviews, which is, I thought was really interesting because it used to be like, you have to have reviews. You install Shopify, you install an email platform, you install a reviews platform. And now it seems like we're moving away from that. It seems like brands are not really using reviews as much, and they're looking for other CRO tactics to convert and build trust with their audience.
Well, I mean, I think that some of this, like the email and SMS and reviews and some of these other broad stroke categories that you created to kind of highlight the specific categories and then how they grew in particular, it goes back to, we're recording this about a month before Shopify Editions 2025, but at Shopify Editions 2024, Toby spoke something that I brought up a few times, which is they want to they want the Shopify core product to do most things for most merchants, right? Which is such a good clarify. I use it in educating people about the Shopify product all the time. And it's just like, Shopify will probably never take over email SMS just because it is just its own monster, its own beast, and it's not what their core product does. While it does offer Shopify email, it's just the most basic thing in the world. If you want more functionality out of it that's more unique to your brand, that's why these other things exist. Same thing with reviews. Shopify Reviews, the one that just is native to the ecosystem, native to Shopify, their homegrown app, as you will. It's one of the first things we see brands replace as they kind of start to move up market. So some of these kind of categories aren't necessarily core to the e-commerce experience to sell a widget to somebody online, but they do make it better if you're building a business.
Yeah, definitely. And one qualification for the report is we took out any native Shopify apps. So like we don't consider the native Shopify apps as part of the analysis. But I think what's interesting is that we're still at $1 million a year brand. So I would say like it's still fairly scaled, and still half of them don't use these, some of these tools, which, well, actually the rest of the tools, because everybody's lower than reviews. What really, the category as a category, what I'd say really broke out this year that we actually didn't even have as a category in previous years' reports is what I'm just bucketing as kind of analytics and data. So these are things like heat mapping tools, server-side tracking tools, things that basically I kind of bucket as like we need data back from what we lost in iOS 14 still, and all the tool and tech stack around it. A lot of these players either weren't on the list or weren't that like high up on the list when we started doing this when we started looking at this a year or two ago. Microsoft Clarity went from not on the list to number 5. Hotjar has actually fallen the farthest. They were number 2 in the first iteration of this list. Now they're number 8. Triple Whale, I actually remember talking to the founders when they launched that in 2020. Now it's the 19th most installed app. You have Elevar in the top 50. What I find the most interesting about this category is actually there's all this analytics to look at like what's going on the site and understanding user data. VWO is at 100, like barely made the list at all. And it's the only A/B testing tool in the entire report. Like A/B testing is not a popular practice. It's not a widely common adopted, tool and tech stack in this, considering, 15% of stores use Microsoft Clarity. If we bundle it with all of the other heat mapping tools, it's almost 25.
I wonder what that would look like. Did you guys do this report when Google Optimize was still around, or did it happen afterwards?
No, Google Optimize was in the top, I think 30 or 40 in the first year of the report. And it was actually even still fairly highly ranked when last year after it was sunset.
Yeah, because what I've noticed is merchants don't know like what fills that spot for merchants now that Google Optimize is gone, which Google Optimize was free and was awesome. Because it was free, you deal with the quirks of it. But now it doesn't exist, and there's a bunch of other solutions out there that we like and recommend, but also they are of various price points and investment levels, and whom it makes sense for. Some of them just went way enterprise with their pricing structures and how they wanted to do it, which may be why, we haven't seen someone really penetrate this list very well. But I know outside of this list and just what I see from the LinkedIn ecosystem and atmospheres, there are some players in the space, and it's super fun to watch them talk shit about each other's product.
Yes, it's definitely a space that's heating up. My guess is over the next 5 years, I don't know that anyone will necessarily replace Google Optimize, but I do think you'll see a bunch of players start to emerge, and maybe a little bit more even upmarket than 1 million, probably not like 5-10 million and up space.
Well, I'll just tell you right now, I tell brands, so if you want to get a statistical significant result on a split test, you're trying to increase your conversion rate. That comes down to how many conversions or sales you're getting. And it comes down to like your average order value affects like how rapidly you're going to hit these things based on your conversion, blah, blah, blah. Just like a non-scientific number is like, it's around $5 million a year when you can start to hit you can start to hit stat sig on a test in about a week. And that's when everyone can do their job efficiently. Below that, it gets a lot harder to do real CRO. And so I could see why that's affecting where things are on this list.
Yeah, definitely. Although I've looked at the 10 million segment and there aren't very many players there either. So my guess is that will be the space to watch next as brands, the Facebook magic money machine is definitely dying down and brands are definitely trying to put as much data back in there. And I think the past 3 or 4 years have been defined by that. I think the next 3 to 4 years will be defined by, how do we get back to that CRO fundamentals, really relying on a channel mix and all those different players than just pushing as much Facebook traffic through our site as possible.
Absolutely. What else was surprising about this list? Obviously, there's so much more than what we're talking about here. We're barely scratching the surface, everybody.
Yeah. So now we talked about the big categories. I think let's flip to the other side. One of the personal biggest surprises and shocks for me, especially coming out of spending so much time working at Gorgias, is only 21% of this segment has a support tool at all. Like 80% of brands in the segment just don't use a tool for customer support. Now, for the 21 that do, is an absolute very, very tight 2-horse race between Gorgias and Zendesk. Zendesk has a little bit more installs. Gorgias is growing faster. And it seems like every year we do this report, it's the same place. So like Zendesk is a little bit bigger, Gorgias is growing faster. There should be a convergence point somewhere.
Yeah, Zendesk had quite a few years head start, but Gorgias came in very niched to Shopify. Oh, exclusive to Shopify, actually.
Yeah. I would say like Gorgias took the same playbook as like Gorgias and Zendesk they're modeling that very closely off of Klaviyo and MailChimp. Mm-hmm. There's the big legacy SaaS that everybody uses, and then we want to be the like very Shopify focused version of the same tool set and problem. But yeah, I was just surprised by how many people currently do not use a customer support tool.
What are they just managing it in their inbox? That sounds crazy.
Yeah, I think it is. But also, if you go back to the same math you were doing for CRO, like if you think about $1 million, $2 million a year brand, how many orders are they really getting a month? And then, you can kind of proxy out how many tickets they get by how many orders.
Yeah. And you know what? Not only just with customer support, but that's a conversation because like being on the agency side, you have a million ideas, and anytime you bring up a good idea to your clients, they're like, we want to do that. But then you're like, okay, let's talk about this like nuts and bolts. Returns kind of in the same wheelhouse as customer support. At $1 million a year, they're selling enough product that's paying for a couple people's livelihoods, whatever. But to make it worthwhile to pay for some of these like return solutions, you kind of need not only 500, you need beyond 500 sales a month, you need 500 returns initiated a month to make this make sense.
Right.
Which is, I would argue, a lot bigger than $1 million a year brand.
Yeah. I mean, if you just think about like the high returning return, and we can talk about returns next. I have some crazy conspiracy theories about what I think is going to happen to like the loyalty subscription returns market. But, if you think about returns, to hit 500 returns a month, even in like a big return category, like 30% fashion apparel, footwear, you have to be doing 1,500 to 2,000 orders a month.
Yeah, and at a $75 AOV, that's $5-10 million brand.
Right. Yeah. Right. And like, you can build a quick math up of like why, returns.
That math was really wrong, by the way.
We were close enough. I said we're directionally right, not literally right.
Yeah.
Returns is a 3% market as well. Like 97% of brands in this segment don't have a returns platform. And I think it's probably the same thing. They probably are just routing it through their help desk. Probably most of the emails they get are returns processes. They probably have like a simple form that handles the information that it does. But yeah, I think like there's one of the things I always hope to accomplish with this report is I feel like there's a lot of information and noise, and you kind of assume that like everybody is doing it this way, when really most brands, they have a very core tech stack. And then as they get bigger, they layer on all of these other layers of, more sophistication. So I think for my spiciest take coming out of all this report is loyalty is a 14% market with really 3 to 4 key players being Smile, Yapo, GrowWave, which I think most people probably haven't heard of, and then Loyalty Lion. Subscription is basically just recharge. Like subscription, only 9. I think this is like one of the biggest myths in the space is like everybody uses a subscription program and it's great for your e-commerce brand. 91% of brands don't use a subscription tool and don't have a subscription offering. And I think if we map this out over the next 5 years, I think loyalty and subscription are going to consolidate into one category, and it's going to look nothing like it does today. And here are the 2 reasons why. One, they're just so low adoption that yes, if you get really big brands on it, it can work from the SaaS perspective. But I think you're going to see all of those people want to grow more. They're both basically just trying to solve the same problem. Loyalty is a usually point and discount based model to get people to come back and buy more. Subscription is a discount based model to get people to come back and buy more on a habit, essentially. And the reason why I think these 2 things are consolidated is personally, I think subscriptions don't make sense for 99.9% of e-com brands. Like I just think their business model does not fit. I need something on a recurring every monthly basis. And loyalty, I think the biggest miss that the entire Shopify ecosystem had with loyalty is we went, okay, loyalty is a tried and true retail tactic, so it has to work for e-commerce brands. But if you think about all the best loyalty programs, they're retailers of other people's products, right? Amazon Prime is a great loyalty program. They mostly, they sell a lot of their own products, but they mostly sell other people's products. Yeah. Your grocery store sells other people's products. Sephora, Nordstrom, like all of these, like if you go down the list of, the inspirational loyalty programs, they're not brands who are selling you more of what the brand makes. And so I think as brands start to figure out like, hey, my fashion apparel or most of my beauty cosmetics brands don't really make sense to have on a subscribe and save model. Loyalty doesn't really drive the needle. I think we're actually going to see these 2 things just fold into one category of just get people back. And I don't know what that looks like yet, but my assumption is it's going to be something that taps into both models, but it's not going to be what we think it is today.
Absolutely. One of my kind of interesting takeaways from this is looking through the site extensions category. A lot of this got its lunch eaten by OS 2.0. There's a lot of stuff in here that is, if I was going to consult on a store and build a new site, would be replaced by native functionality or some very straightforward code. There within this top 100, there's 50 something apps that I think are on borrowed time.
Maybe, but to your point before, if it ain't broke.
That's until they talk to me, baby.
Chase just got his list of all of these clients he's going to get, but just like, hey, here are 10 apps that you can remove from one project with us.
Dude, you joke about that, but when we do diagnostics for people, one of the number one things we're doing is we're looking in at their app stack and re-educating them on their choices. And that alone saves people thousands of dollars a month in app fees.
Yeah. And I do think like it's such an interesting thing of like, when I was on the brand side, we were very much a diehard of like plug in an app for this and this, and everything has to be very point solution and very specific. And now everybody's like, I want one platform. I want one thing to do everything. I think we'll net out somewhere in the middle. Like, some tools will be great for this. Some tools will be great for that. I think what was interesting to me, because the site extensions is always a tough category because it's kind of just candidly just a mix. Like we kind of just, toss everything in a bowl because there aren't really too many clear categories we can break it out to. But what really stood out to me first is a lot of this is like the data notices. GDPR, accessibility, cookie consent, like those have become very, very popular and grew like crazy this year. a lot of it still is kind of the plug and play, we want the cart extension. We want the form builder. We want the, that kind of like stuff that you could build, but it's easier probably just to plug in an app and wrap around it. And then the third thing to me was the most surprising is kind of what we talked about before. Like, it's just some of the old stuff that still is just super popular that, is the stuff that we don't consider to be crazy or new or people think about a lot, but clearly must still provide a lot of value because they're still growing pretty well.
Oh man, one of these has insane year-over-year growth.
Is that checkout blocks?
Well, yeah, theirs is huge, but they're awesome. But no, Userway, the website accessibility, unless it was a typo.
Yeah. Well, okay. So checkout blocks grew so much, Shopify actually just acquired them and made them a native feature.
Yeah.
And there was another one who kind of just like came out of nowhere and just became insanely popular. And then, yeah, Userway, like this accessibility, the data consent, just like that, all of them, like it was just a good category to be in, and everyone grew a lot, which is super interesting. They all have lower price points, so it's a little bit more attainable, and it's becoming a mandatory thing for everyone to have. But yeah, like all of those kind of just becoming like a checkbox for everybody to have, all the stuff that just appears at the bottom of everybody's site.
Absolutely, Jeremy. Now, we're going to link to this report in the show notes here, but where do you hang out on the internet? Where can people find more information about you and the brands that you're investing in? And just kind of, do you have an email list where I can sign up to get the 2026 report when it comes out?
Yes. So best place to follow me is LinkedIn, Jeremy Horowitz, Horowitz. I post twice a day, everything e-com, Shopify related, helpful. I break out a lot of the data in my posts on a weekly basis. I also run a newsletter called Let's Buy a Biz, where yes, if you do want to sign up, it will be through my LinkedIn. You can get first access. And yeah, that's the best place to follow me across all the stuff and catch the updates for next year.
Awesome. Jeremy, thank you so much for coming on the show today.
Thanks. Appreciate the time, Chase.
We can't thank our guests enough for coming on the show and sharing their knowledge and journey with us. We've got a lot to think about and potentially add into our own businesses. You can find all the links in the show notes. You can subscribe to the newsletter at honestycommerce.co to get each episode delivered right into your inbox. If you're enjoying this content, consider leaving a review on iTunes. That really helps us out. Lastly, if you're a store owner looking for an amazing partner to help you get your Shopify store to the next level, reach out to Electric Eye at electriceye.io/connect. Until next time.